G'day. So you'd like to cross the Simpson. Maybe you don't know anyone else to go with you, or you don't want to go on a tag along. So, crossing the Simpson solo, is it crazy or not?
You gotta work it hard to be a solo man. You're gonna take
And no, you don't need to be the solo man to cross the Simpson solo. We're assuming that solo means that you're just travelling as a single vehicle. You could be a family, or you could be going just as one person, just yourself. Often people make comments like, what if something goes wrong? Or, aren't you worried about being by yourself? And what if you break down? Well, we'll address each of these comments one by one. Let's look at the first one. What happens if something goes wrong? Well, plenty could go wrong, but it's unlikely to actually happen. You could have a mechanical, you could have an accident, or you could have a medical emergency. Let's look at what would happen if you had a mechanical in the Simpson. As with other issues, being prepared is the best way of dealing with problems such as a mechanical. It could be as simple as a puncture, but what if you got 3 punctures? It's highly unlikely that you will get even one puncture if you're crossing any of the tracks across the Simpson. You could maybe get a puncture if you drive off track, and this could happen when you're looking for a campsite perhaps. So best advice would be to stay on the tracks. At the very least, you should be carrying a standard tyre repair kit, which you can use to plug a puncture. All tyres should be light truck tyres with plenty of tread left. The standard tyres that come with most vehicles just aren't up to the task and could increase your risk of getting a puncture. Should you carry 2 spares or 1? I've always had 1 spare, but I also have a repair kit that includes tyre levers and a bead breaker so that I can remove the tyre from the wheel and make a repair that couldn't be done with a normal plug kit. And in tens of thousands of kilometres driving the outback, I've never had a puncture. In nearly 300,000 Ks in 13 years with the FJ, I've actually only had 2 punctures, and they were in the city. The likelihood of a puncture is very low, and the risk to your safety is low as well. What about mechanical issues? If you're with a group, could another vehicle tow you out of the desert? Now that's very unlikely. Your vehicle would probably need to be put on the back of a trailer or a unimog and could cost $10,000. So the best way of dealing with this would be to have some sort of insurance or roadside assistance, which could reimburse you. And that would be a good idea whether you're travelling with a group or solo. There are some problems that can be repaired using zip ties, wire, or gaffer tape. My fuel hose actually came disconnected once while I was driving. I quickly grabbed a fire extinguisher. I then reconnected it and repaired it using zip ties. And those zip ties are still on there to this day. The best way of reducing the likelihood of a mechanical is being prepared, and by getting your vehicle serviced thoroughly about a month before your trip. I know some groups who take all manner of spares, like bearings and CV joints when they're crossing the Simpson. If you think you're going to need bearings or CV joints, these should be in good order prior to your trip. If you're going east to west, maybe don't try and get up the hardest track on Big Red at the start of your trip. Speed can do a lot of damage to your vehicle. One year there was a big hole at the base of the 3rd dune west of Big Red. It was a big dune, so people put a lot of speed in. I did, and I bent a tow bar on it. And even Ronny Dahl hit it with too much speed.
Dune number 3.
That year there were quite a few vehicles that didn't get past the 1st dune and had to return to Birdsville for repairs. Now I suspect that some of those never ventured into the desert again that year. Generally, you're travelling at relatively low speed, so accidents would not be particularly bad if they did occur. There is one accident that is a concern and has been quite tragic in the desert in the past. And that's at the top of dunes, when you're driving up the top of one dune, someone else is driving up on the other dune, and there's a chance of having a head-on at the top of that dune. Now, sand flags and radios are great at preventing this type of accident in most cases. However, motorcycles are probably the biggest danger, as they travel fast and sometimes don't have radios and definitely don't have flags. If you're travelling across the Simpson on the Mannequin line, it's a one-way track for the majority of the track, which minimises the chance of head-on. It has a lot less traffic than most of the other routes across the Simpson. A time to avoid going across the Simpson is just before or just after the Big Red Bash, as there are many people travelling to and from the Big Red Bash and heading across the desert. So unless you like a lot of people, stay away from that time of the year. The more likely chance of an accident will occur around camp, and a good first aid kit will normally be enough for most things. If you have a serious underlying medical condition that could leave you incapacitated, perhaps travelling solo as an individual, then it's not a great idea to go solo. If you have other people with you, then the risk of a bad outcome is reduced, and you'll certainly need to take all your prescription medicines and have enough for at least a week and possibly 2. There's one medical emergency apart from accidents that could stop you in your tracks, and that's a snake bite. Now, you should be travelling in winter and snakes are less active, however, they are still active. So you should have snake bandages close to you at all times. Being bitten by a snake is unlikely, but if you were to be bitten and didn't apply the correct first aid, there's a good chance that you'd be dead before help could arrive. So if you did need help, how would you get it? Technology is changing so quickly these days, there's no one answer. It used to be a satellite phone was the most valuable kit that you could carry. However, there are a number of other options these days. Personal locator beacons, or PLBs, can be certainly useful. All you need to do is just set them off and they'll send a message up to a satellite for at least 24 to 48 hours. They will normally these days send your position, but they won't send what type of emergency that you're having. It's a one-way communication device, so you will have no idea if or when help is on the way. Another option is a Garmin InReach or a spot tracker. These are great as friends and partners can monitor your progress across your trip. It will send up to satellites your position up to every 10 minutes or so, and people at home can monitor you on Google Earth and know exactly where you are. It's a good way for them of joining in the journey as well, even though you're not talking to them. So they are really one of the most popular devices carried. They also have an SOS button that will work like a PLB. The latest bit of tech are the new iPhones, the iPhone 14s and 15s. They will allow you to communicate with a satellite in an emergency and have two-way communications with your emergency responders. So these are quite good. There's also Starlink. Although I wouldn't consider it an emergency device, it can be used to communicate with the outside world. But it does require some setting up before you can achieve that contact with the outside world. Now, is travelling solo scary or lonely? No, there is a feeling of intrepidation as you set off over the first dune, but that's all part of the adventure. And although it sounds counterintuitive, there is plenty to see in the desert. Take your time, enjoy the landscape, and be on the lookout for birds and animals. You never know what is over the next dune. Crossing the Simpson solo, it's a great way to go. Have fun out there. And certainly not crazy.